Welcome to Atlantic Center for the Arts and Inside Out.
So here we go. 165 is off and running.
Thank you. I want to thank the ACA, first of all, for inviting me to be one of the resident artists during this session. It's been swell. And I worked with 8 terrific writers. And what we did was we read one another's work, and then we met every day for a couple of hours in the writer's studio and talked about that work, hopefully, helpfully. And some of the work that people did was fiction, some of it was memoir, and some of it was a combination of the two. And you're going to hear some of that work now, but I'd like to introduce each of the writers. Maybe you could stand up if you can be seen. Gro Flatebo, Thomas Frick, Andrew Millward, Marco Kaye, Sandy Poole, Stephanie Harrison, Catherine Smith, and Elizabeth Pincus. So there they are. All right. So as my favorite 5-year-old says, without further ado, we can move on. Okay. So.
Yeah. Thank you, Sigrid. I'm John Gibson. I'm a composer who has been working here with 8 wonderful composers, and we've had a great time trying all kinds of new things. I myself have tried some new things. I thought I was going to work on a piece that I've been working on for many months, but I ended up going to the beach at 6 a.m. and recording the surf. That's a great thing about a place like this, is that you get to do things that you didn't expect you would do, and that's, I did it. So our composers have been doing a lot of different things. Some have been making music for acoustic instruments. Others have been working with electronic music, some of which is what we call fixed media. It means you make it and then we play it on speakers. And then we've also been working with some live electronics. And at the end of the program, you'll hear another thing we've been doing during the residency, which is improvising together. That's what this big setup is for. And maybe I'll say a few words about that when we get to it. I do want to call everybody to stand up, and if you could get some lights up. I'll just go through the names, and maybe we can hold our applause until everybody is acknowledged. Iddo Aharony, Josh Clausen, Weilu, Nathan Haering, Eva Kára, Tom Nazziola, Chris Poovey, Brian Sears. Give him a hand. So I wanted to make one extra little note here, which is that in your program for the improv piece that is last, one of the people participating is not listed on the program, so I wanted to just tell you that also participating will be Weilu. So without further ado, what do I do with this? I guess I need to put this back here. Are we good? Okay.
Hello, thank you. The only thing I wanted to say about this piece you're going to hear is that I found I was attracted to this sound that kept happening. I kept putting it in. I'm like, why am I using this sound? And I realized that after 3 weeks of hearing these lizards run across the sidewalk and into the woods, like every day, that's where it came from. So the lizards are in here a little bit. You'll hear some of that.
Hello. So, Birdsong is part of a larger ongoing work. It's based on some of the field recordings I made around the center.
This is one of those times that I feel like music is a lot more fun than words. I'd like to be able to do that with language. But anyway, this is not something I worked on here. It's an essay I wrote, or it's from an essay I wrote quite a while ago. But when I was today working on it and shortening it and adapting it for tonight, I was thinking it's not really, well, the current form is not really so much of an essay as a manifesto, I think. See what you think, I don't know. Anyway, it's called The Body of the Book. In 1968, the science fiction writer Isaac Asimov wrote a short story called The Holmes-Ginsburg Device. In part, it was a parody of James Watson's recently published The Double Helix, a controversial account of the discovery of the structure of DNA, which revealed some of the less noble motivations of the scientists involved. Reviewers of the time actually feared the book might corrupt young science students. When Asimov looked back at his story, he found he was very fond of its humor. What I find interesting almost 50 years later is the arc of its plot. This is an odd circumstance for science fiction, which is often quickly superseded by actual events. In the story's future, books as we know them have been completely forgotten and replaced by an advanced form of microfilm viewer. One day, the narrator asks a colleague why he is the only scientist on campus who doesn't have bloodshot eyes. The colleague answers, "Once I was viewing a microfilm with my head completely enclosed in the viewer, naturally. When I was doing that, a gorgeous girl passed by and I never even noticed her. From that time on, I vowed never to look at a microfilm again." This gives you a glimpse of Asimov's idea of humor in 1968. He submitted the story to Esquire magazine, which quickly rejected it. No surprise, because at that time they were publishing Jean Genet and William Burroughs' comments on the riots at the Democratic Convention, Timothy Leary's account of LSD trips with Allen Ginsberg, and Susan Sontag's controversial trip to Hanoi. Asimov's story goes on to tell about the struggle to invent a better reading device. First came the idea of enlargement to eliminate squinting into cumbersome microfilm viewers. But that required wheeled ladders in order to read large expanses of text hanging on the wall. Then someone had the idea of division into smaller units, but that led to the puzzle of how to arrange and handle them. The protagonists first think they've accomplished a Nobel-worthy achievement when they attach segments side by side and roll them up, thus in effect recreating the ancient scroll. But the cumbersome unrolling and re-rolling was a problem, especially when trying to locate a certain passage. Finally, they arrived at the brilliant solution of the portable, bound volume of separate pages. At the happy ending of the tale, the narrator has his Nobel Prize. The name Holmes-Ginsburg device is shortened to book, and the inventors can save their eyes for the more serious business of looking at girls. Beyond the petty behavior of scientists, the more fundamental satire of this story concerns the pretense of scientific progress in light of the Platonic concept of anamnesis. This is a Greek word that means unforgetting, the idea that our knowledge is actually a recollection of things previously known and forgotten. The logic of the book, once arrived at, survives beneath the changing technology of the world, as in Asimov's story, like a permanent genotype lodged in our cultural DNA, always ready to reemerge. Historically, the change from the classical scroll to the bound pages of the Codex had profound effects on our habits of reading and thought. For one thing, codexes were portable. Ancient writers marveled that such immense works as those of Homer and Virgil could be contained in such a small object. Their size made them personal as well. They were no longer confined to libraries and monasteries. They could be carried about, held in the hands. Bookmarks could be inserted to mark locations. Each page had margins, which provoked commentaries, a form of dialogue with the text. Though a scroll, as it's unrolled, shows the reader's progress through a text, the metaphor of depth is more closely allied to the three-dimensionality of the book. But the strongest attraction of books lies in their mirroring of our human form, their creation in our image. A book has a head and foot, a spine, and bilateral symmetry. Each leaf has two sides, thus a book, when open, offers us recto and verso, right and left, reflecting the organization of our bodies. The book's halves correspond to our two hands, our two eyes. We want to be on the same page. or turn a new leaf, on the one hand, and on the other hand, are physically mirrored in the book and metaphorically reflected in our dialogue with it. We can go further. A book opens before us like a door. The pages spread like wings. The recto and verso can even be seen as lungs, packed with the alveoli of words, a cellular matrix where textual absorption and mental respiration take place. It's as good an image as any for the mystery of what we blithely call reading, as if we know what that is. The Platonic irony of Asimov's satire is played out in the digital era, since the scroll has returned in electronic form. Screen reading, however, no longer conveys texts in a way that responds to our readerly bodies. Unresistant and eager to please, electronic text may mimic the turning of pages and the recto-verso format, but they are unitary in their fundamental nature as coded data. Insofar as they are transparent to search engines, they are open to every possible point of entry, as if the purpose of a book was simply its index. In fact, they are no longer books, but charts of information, ever expanding, never complete. We, however, are physical creatures. Our bilateral symmetry, our back and forth, our left and right, our asking and answering, our I and thou, these fractures are essential to our wholeness. A book's inseparable halves branch from its spine, which mirrors our spine. Our hands become the book that they hold, in a position resembling a kind of prayer. Our responsiveness to the form of the book is total, and our bodies and minds are not likely to forget it. Thanks.
Hi, good evening. I'm Elizabeth. I'm working on a memoir about my work life, and I'm going to read just a really brief excerpt here. This episode happens when I'm 22 years old. In the early 1980s, I was back in Minneapolis, working the ticket booth at a music club, 7th Street Entry. I was in town for just a flash, long enough to land a spot at this epicenter of the hardcore scene. The Entry was the dirty sibling of a larger club next door, First Avenue, which occupied a wraparound building on the corner that used to be an Art Deco Greyhound station. Now, 7th Street Entry was a grubby black-walled dive, and proud of it. My job was as low-tech as it gets. I collected cash at the door and shoved it into the slots of a bulky metal cash register. At the end of the night, I'd carry my cash drawer to the manager's office, count and bundle the bills, and fill out a simple ledger sheet. There was a poster in the office taped right at my sightline as I sat and tallied the evening's take. It featured a lithe young dude with a skeezy mustache and a bare chest draped in gold chains. He wore purple velvet pants. It was the first image I ever glimpsed of the man. Prince gained his notoriety at First Avenue, but I'm sad to say I never saw him perform. I tended to stay on the entry side and would linger there even on my nights off. I wasn't a real punk. Call me punk adjacent. At my club, I heard local legends Husker Du and the Suicide Commandos, and visiting royalty like the Au Pairs and the Raincoats, and James Carroll of Basketball Diaries fame. I drank cheap beer and pogoed in place and suffered the indignities of the Entry's famously disgusting single bathroom stall. I befriended a fellow staffer, Shelley, who worked at the bar. One time she lent me a sweater, a puffy pink mohair number, bearing traces of her sweet perfume. I wore it at work, loving the contrast of the hot pink hue against the club's signature black walls. Shelley taught me how to fold the sleeves of the oversized cuffs to keep them rolled up. Pinch the fabric closely at your wrist, roll it over once, then tightly fold it a second time. It's a technique I use to this day. While in Minneapolis, I rented a hole-in-the-wall pad on 26th Street, just down the block from a pair of establishments that would loom large in Twin Cities music history. Orfolk Jokopus Records on one corner, and the CC Club across the way. Later that decade, I'd go mad for the Replacements, a band whose members treated Orfolk as their living room and may have survived on the trashy bar food served at the CC Club. The Mats were my neighbors, roaming the same patch of South Minneapolis as I was, but I didn't know it at the time. I didn't know what I was doing there. I decided to light out for the territory. I set my sights westward and bought a plane ticket for San Francisco. I had no particular plans. The city on the bay was queer, bohemian, literary, and beautiful. This would have to suffice.
That was friggin' great. I'm from Minneapolis. So, I'm going to play two pieces for you, excerpts of these two pieces. I'm in one thing that I do, really interested in pop culture and inspired by Jonathan, one of our amazing artists. Here whose work that you should go see right after this in the studios. I'm going to play you the first 2 minutes. Of one of those pop culture inspired pieces. It samples the movie Back to the Future. So I'm going to put this up here for you to look at while we do this thing here. So.
No McFly, 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 ever a McFly, no McFly, no McFly, ever a McFly, McFly, no McFly, ever a monitor, anything in the McFly, ever a monitor, no McFly, ever no McFly, no McFly, ever a monitor, anything in the history of no McFly, ever a monitor, anything in the history of Bill That McFly, no 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 McFly, in the history of anything in the history of Bill, anything in the history of no McFly, ever in the history of anything in the history of ever a monitor, anything ever a monitor, anything in the history of Bill. In the history of history is kind of history is kind of changed. No McFly, no McFly, no McFly, no McFly. History.
All right. So part of the reason that I put this image up here has to do with the next thing that I want to show you, which I did work on here. This is a little bit older piece. But this thing with these stripes over the eyes, like redacting, or like cutting away from the eyes, that ended up being a thing that became a part of this next piece. I've kind of done this with covers, like whenever there's a figure, which there is a lot, in the stuff that I do, like I end up cutting out the eyes, and it's like, why, put the title there. And I think I'm starting to understand why I do that. It's because when there's these characters, like these movie characters, I think of them like they're not really the principal and the high school kid from the movie. Like, to me, they're archetypes. They're like, they communicate something, like bigger. The sample is like a means to something else, not like the movie. So that redaction thing, ended up coming in to this next thing. So this, I should like briefly talk about like the performance that is part of this. There is a performance that 7 people were asked to do in front of this ball, this purple ball here. They had to sit in front of it and smile for as long as they could. It's like this endurance, kind of thing. And I decided I would write a piece of chamber music for Wild Rumpus Chamber Ensemble out of San Francisco, that would follow the trajectory of pain and distress and despair that emerged from this experiment. And before I'm gonna play the thing as the last thing, but I want to show you like a GIF that that I made also as part of this. That is the sort of extreme direction that is gonna come at the end. I haven't gotten to that part yet. It's only like mildly uncomfortable in the point that I've gotten to. But when I get to like the really evil, horrible music, the worst expressions that they had didn't match like the nastiness that I wanted to create. So I'm trying to take it into this sort of Francis Bacon territory. Like I'm treating individual frames, as you can do with GIFs, to like mess up the eyes, and I want to like exaggerate the teeth and blur it. So you see some like really nightmarish kind of business, and then you can see the redaction happening over the eyes. So once that happens, it really like you mix a bunch of this up together like really fast and really arrhythmically. It does get pretty scary. So, all right. Here is 2 minutes of that piece that I just described. Thank you.
All right, that was awesome, Josh. Can't wait to see where it's going. And now for something completely different. And specifically, the piece I would like to share with you is for double bass, electronics, and video. And it's been in the works on and off for about a year, give and take. And only here, though, at ACA, I was able to create a kind of fixed media, as John mentioned, the fixed media version of the music of this piece. It still needs a bit of tweaking, but we still have tomorrow, so we'll hopefully get there. It's a collaboration with 3 other artists who are not here tonight. Let me make sure. No, they're not here tonight. So one is a double bass player, Matt Gold. Another is a filmmaker, Kevin Lee. And the other is a writer named Stephen Boone. And this piece specifically started from an essay that Stephen wrote called Occupying the Banks. I should mention that Stephen spent most of the last 8 years experiencing homelessness. And so this essay, Occupying the Banks, reflects his experiences sleeping in bank lobbies, ATM lobbies in downtown Chicago over several winters. And in the piece, what Kevin, the filmmaker, and Stephen did was to revisit these spaces, those ATM lobbies, and film. All the video components of the piece are made from that shooting, and it was all made with one of these devices, practically without any kind of post-production processing, a bit of color corrections, that kind of stuff. And then the 4 of us came together and kind of tried to figure out how the double bass and the electronics can conversate with the images, how they can have a space to dialogue. The piece is about 8 minutes long, and it's called Occupation. So thank you for watching and listening.
Hi, my name is Gro Flatebo. And what you need to know for this short little piece is that Edith Mays, my 87-year-old next-door neighbor, she had a fire in her house. Because the fire was so extensive, it had to be cleaned out, gutted, and rebuilt. She was a hoarder, and she had 6 generations of belongings in her house. So, on a warm July morning, the sun brightened the south side of Edith May's house and caught my eye as I looked out my bedroom window. I watched as a workman pried off the white vinyl siding. Grunt work meant the youngest and smallest of the crew did this job. Standing on a board strung between 2 ladders, the young man worked the pliable vinyl off the house, stripping it down to uncover a layer of gray clapboards original to the Cape Cod-style house. That wood carried a history. My mother had a twin brother, Bert, Edith May told me, just 2 weeks before as we sat in her gazebo. When he was 13 years old, he spent a day whitewashing the south wall of the house. She used her thumb to point in that direction. The day was hot and still, and he didn't wear a hat or shirt. By dawn the next day, he was dead from heat stroke. I watched that young worker and his shadow against the clapboards that July morning, the grace of his movements, echoes of Bert's shadows from a century before. The wood had not been seen for more than 50 years and looked in need of whitewashing or a good coat of paint. The next day, the clapboards were gone, stripped off and tossed in a dumpster. In cleaning out Edith May's house the month before, I had found a dagger-shaped lachrymatory vial, or teardrop catcher. The bottom of the crystal vial was tapered to a point, and the 6 facets of cut glass all had fine scroll work. A bee was etched on the side. The stopper was prism-like and reflected rainbows throughout the room I was in. The Victorians used lachrymatory vials to collect their tears when someone died. The stopper had a gap that allowed the tears to evaporate, signaling when the mourning period was over. A salty film clung to the inside of this vial. There had been a lot of tears.
Thank you. This has been a great experience so far. Thank you to my fellow artists and master artists. I'm going to read from the first 2.5 pages of a novel that I recently finished and put the finishing touches on here. So if you happen to be a literary agent out there, please speak with me after this is done. This is called Remember the Damps. My name is Marco Kaye, by the way. For the past 8 years, I had worked in music marketing at Revelations Records. Our specialty was promoting washed-up one-hit wonders. One day, I hoped to work with talent that was actually talented, or even a wonder that was still hitting. Mostly, I had written a lot of radio ads that began, "They're back, and so is rock and roll." The trouble was that Frank Kempman, Revelation's CEO, had peaked during the Hall & Oates era, when hope was the thing with feathered hair. During meetings, he'd stressed the imaginative, disruptive side of our jobs. Come production time, Frank was all compromise, content to sit back and let the artist do the heavy lifting while he pocketed his cut, happy to lead a tinnitus-free life. His overall strategy paid off. Revelations was both an industry joke and case study in how to monetize implosive careers. Though Napster had ravaged our roster, the label was safe. We sat atop a stockpile of smash hits. How a decades-old breakup song could wend its way into, say, a Prilosec commercial amazed me daily. We'd even soldiered through the recession. A year later, Frank realized he could no longer disregard digital. So with nary a bump in salary, I was promoted. Over my tenure, I had transitioned from radio to guerrilla marketing to embodying our entire digital department, the sole web guy at a label that considered ringtones the height of innovation. I wanted to work in A&R, alongside artists and their demanding people, handling everything from album production to post-mortem holographic rights. Somehow the A&R team, led by Virgil Verge Waters, kept cool at this uncool label. They'd saunter in at 11:30, another night of comp drinks drying in their eyes. Instead, marketing directors would come to me with tight smiles and budgets, excited notions towards a website's look and feel. One Friday near the end of September, final gasp of the aughts, I was about to head out when Emily Gatewood, Frank's radiant assistant, bounded over to my desk. Please tell me you have a Zipcar account. For you? Maybe. I need your zip card. It's an emergency. Though I didn't need a rental this weekend, I found myself drumming up possibilities. Tonight was my second anniversary date with Liz. I'd scored reservations at Juniper, a cozy West Village bistro. Additional weekend plans consisted of the usual: avoiding my roommate Jorge, playing Graven 3 The Unbroken Scream, and discovering new constellations of porn stars. All very local activities. You plotting an escape, Em? Please, take me. This is actually important? Emily cocked a dainty hip. It's for Frank's first signing. Oft-told Kempman lore, Frank had attended a Cuban wedding in Delaware, of all places, at the Hotel DuPont, and introduced his date, Gloria, to Emilio Estefan. When Frank was away, me and other goofballs would call and response yodel the opening vamp to Rhythm Is Gonna Get You. Oh, eh, oh, eh. Oh, eh, oh, ah. I was about to relay the zip card when Frank, way over by the printing nook, yelled, "All of A&R is at that Ciroc meet and greet, even the fuckers without tickets." Frank marched over to my desk, a lengthy contract flopping in his arms. "I think Josh Derwent is around," Emily said. "Perfect." Frank waved at the mostly empty desk. "Find him." Emily scuttled away, Frank vanished, and I was left staring at the project on my monitor, a migraine-inducing web banner for the Baja Men. Something didn't sit right. Josh was a new hire with my former promo job. Josh wore cycling caps indoors. And I was almost certain Josh Derwent was not above the legal rental car age. I hovered at Frank's doorway. He was intently focused on the thick contract, pen tracing over legalese. "Where's the gig?" "Got it covered, Reed," Frank said without looking up. "Have a nice weekend." Normally, I would have retreated. The whole situation was a minefield. If I overstepped my A&R bounds, Verge could have me fired in seconds. Plus, I was excited about Juniper. Liz had hinted that later we might engage in something experimental. But this gig was for Frank's first signing. This band meant something. I could bypass Verge and his A&R cronies starting tonight. I waved the zip card in Frank's direction. Thank you.
Hi. I just want to say something really quick about this piece that I'm about to play. So sometimes, as a composer, you sort of find yourself in a place where things start seeming very similar and you start doing the same thing over and over. And so my experience here, I was really focused on trying to do something a little different. And so the first week that I was here, I spent some time recording random sounds, some stuff in the sculpture studio and some stuff that some of my our artist colleagues were doing, as well as maybe smashing some things and breaking other things, which was all really fun. So it was a really nice start to doing something a little bit different, a little bit experimental, and so that's this piece. So.
Hi, I'm Sandy Poole. Thanks for having me here. I just want to say thanks to Brian for legitimizing the recorder as a valid musical instrument. I just bought my niece the soundtrack to Frozen, and I gave her a recorder for Christmas, and then now she's taking lessons. My sister hates me. I'm going to read from my third book, which is about Alzheimer's, early onset Alzheimer's. It's a memoir about my partner who had early onset Alzheimer's. And all of the chapters are arranged according to the words that are in the Alzheimer's word memory list. You used to read by candlelight in bed because you said it was more romantic than using electricity. I used to wait until you fell asleep to blow out the candle so you didn't set us both on fire. In 1760, a biography of Jonathan Swift accused him of reading in bed and nearly burning down the castle of Dublin, which he then covered up by offering the owner a bribe. In 1778, a biography characterized Samuel Johnson as an insolent child for reading by candlelight. Apparently, out of 29,069 fires recorded in London between 1833 and 1866, only 34 fires could be attributed to reading in bed. Cats were responsible for an equal number of fire incidents. In a pamphlet called "Is Your Home Alzheimer's Proof?" it suggests that all candles should be removed from the bedroom and that flame retardant sheets should be provided to prevent bed fires. I half-jokingly bought you some flame retardant sheets, but we both agreed that they smelled like old people, so we threw them away. When I asked if you ever worried about setting your bedroom on fire, you said you'd never thought about it. You never worried about what you called the hazards of being alive. I worry about everything. For example, I often worry about my apartment. How can I be sure that my apartment will not collapse in the night? How can an architect be sure that my apartment will not collapse in the night? I worry that if my shower curtain is closed, it means there is a serial murderer behind it. I worry that snakes are hiding in my drain pipes and that they are ready to slither into my toilet tank at any moment. I worry that my poet friends are incompetent. My poet friends cannot explain to me how a telephone works. When I call my poet friends on the phone, I imagine them talking into a tin can. Aristotle suggested that courage is the first of human qualities because it guarantees the others. I find I am not very courageous. When my apartment collapses, I will assume it is the end of everything. Unlike you, I am not partial to optimism. One Sunday on Roncesvalles, we passed a poster taped to a lamppost. From what I remember, the poster was a dot matrix style rendering of smiling babies and balloons. A few blocks after passing the post, you said, "Did that sign say Abortion Day?" I said, "Of course not." You said you were sure it did say Abortion Day. You said we should go back and check to see if the poster said Abortion Day. I said that was ridiculous because no one would put up an Abortion Day poster, and certainly no one would put up an Abortion Day poster with babies and balloons on it. I said the poster likely said Adoption Day. You said that was ridiculous because no one adopts babies from a poster. I said we should go back and check to see if the poster said Abortion Day or Adoption Day. You said that was ridiculous because neither one of us wanted to adopt a child. 3 months later, you confessed that you had actually gone back to the lamppost to check and see if the poster said Abortion Day. The poster had been removed, which you thought was evidence that it did indeed say Abortion Day. You were only the competitive about the most unlikely things. You would compete to see who walked faster on the street, or who ate faster, or who wore the nicest sweaters. I was annoyed with you for going back to the poster. I wanted us to be the kind of people who didn't care about the poster. Mostly, I was annoyed because I had also secretly gone back to the poster, and I couldn't bring myself to tell you. Yesterday, I thought I saw your ghost sitting across the street. Your ghost was clutching your tatty pastel pink backpack. I remember the first time I saw the backpack, I asked, why pink? And you exclaimed, be the change you want to see in the world. Gross, I said. And then I said, you sound like a fridge magnet. After the tsunami of 2011, Japanese taxi drivers also reported seeing ghosts. The drivers had taken fares from people only to find the people had vanished during the ride. A driver described how he picked up a woman in a particular district. When the driver explained that the area had been wiped out in the tsunami, he claimed the woman said, "Have I died?" When he turned to speak to her, there was no one else in the car. The article was also quick to point out that 1 in 5 sufferers of PTSD reported seeing something that others could not see. The article claimed that seeing ghosts was most strongly connected to PTSD sufferers who had experienced a tremendous shock as a result of a traumatic event that happened to a close relative, friend, or significant other. I'm not convinced you are a ghost. When I looked back across the street, you were still sitting there. In another article I read, a Japanese man installed a telephone booth with an old rotary phone in his backyard to communicate with his dead cousin. Although the phone was not hooked up, the man could imagine talking to his cousin as a way to deal with his grief. After the tsunami of 2011, people started making pilgrimages to the phone to talk to those who had perished. What would I tell you on the phone? What would I tell your ghost? There's not enough time to say everything. Instead, I would ask questions. On the Japanese rotary phone, one man asked his wife, "Is it cold there? Is it cold where you are?" Thanks.
So as I said before, some of what we've been doing is improvising, and we've had a lot of fun at these sessions. They're very open-ended, very little structure to them, and they're a great way to sort of learn how to listen to each other and contribute in a meaningful way. So that's what we're doing here. There is a little bit of a plan, but not very much of one.
Hi. Thanks, guys. That was great. It was really remarkable. I am Rashawn Griffin, and I'm the master visual artist for this session. I'm going to take a moment to introduce the artists and what we've been doing here. I'm going to have them stand up for a bit. Then I think we're all going to gather here, take a bow, and then we will go over to the art studios, which is kind of right across the hall. There's a painting and there's a sculpture, so we get to see the actual art rather than presenting it here. And I invite you all to come along. They have been working hard and doing beautiful things. But first, I'd just like to take a moment to thank ACA on behalf of me and everyone here. Jim and Nancy behind the scenes, Ivan and Nick and Lexa, everybody for taking care of us. It's literally been an amazing time, so thank you very much. I appreciate that. We all do. So I'm going to keep this brief. I really went after this residency thinking that if I brought a lot of artists together whose work either materially or idea-wise overlapped in some way, but also artists whose work I found inspiring on some level, that magic would happen. And I can say utterly and emphatically after being here for 3 weeks that I was right, and it has. I'd like to take a moment and have these guys stand up really fast. Eva Kára over there, Sean Bitters, Jonathan Frio, Paul Keefe, Nicole Langille, Julia Pavlio, Graham Skeet, and Jonathan Tillit. You guys stay standing for a moment so they can see you. Find them, talk to them about their art. They're all amazing. You won't even see, you'll see maybe a fourth of the work Nicole and Graham have done since they've been here. They're just pounding it out every day. Amelia is a poet with paint. She's been working art. Sean is a conceptualist and screen printer and doing amazing work. He has these fragile landscapes he's been working on, also explosive. Paul is a genius painter, even though he will tell you otherwise. Julie is a prophet from another world, and like a true rock star has worked her butt off, packed up all the work, sent it to New York for an opening that's happening in SRO Gallery in Brooklyn tomorrow night. Congratulations, Julie. You will see none of her art. Jonathan Tillit makes work he's meticulous and disgusting, and it's beautiful. It's both from this world and another world entirely. Despite what you may have heard about us artists, Jonathan Frio has not left the studio. He's been painting day and night, and even though the subject matter is the ocean, he's been there very hardly any. I think that's all of you guys. They really are inspiring. Find them, talk to them. They're amazing. I got everyone, right? Yeah, that's good. So thank you for spending this time with me. I find it humbling, and I have nothing but gratitude in my heart. So thanks. Why don't I have all the associates and master artists come up here momentarily. Stand up. I'm serious. Come up. Come on. Let's go. Everyone's been working here, so inspiring. Thank you to all of you. And we'll take a bow here. Ready? Let's go. There we go. Thank you. We can have refreshments, and we're done. Go look at art across the hall. It's fantastic. Wonderful job. Try.